There it is. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mitch Coons. I'm the communication manager for the Clallam EDC. And today we're fortunately joined by Kylan Johnson and Colleen McAleer from the Clallam EDC. Kylan is the founder and strategic director of Wander Fuca here in Port Angeles. He also manages Visit Port Angeles and has had some success on YouTube as well. So really excited to have him. We're doing a little bit different today. We're actually going to have more of a fireside chat, ask some questions, engage in some thoughtful conversations, and just see where the conversation takes us. So we're really excited. If you have any questions throughout, Kylan is totally on board to field your questions. So go ahead and put them in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll call on you. Before we kick it off, though, just remind you to stay on mute just so we avoid inadvertent backdoor noise. And like I said, if you have questions, go ahead and put it in the chat. And this is on recorded, so it'll be on our website later today. So without further ado, let's jump into it. How you doing, Kylan?
Hey, I'm doing good. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited for this conversation and yeah, excited to talk about the things that we've been working on here. There's a lot going on in Port Angeles and we're happy to be a part of our little sliver of it. So,
Absolutely. So I just wanted to kick it off with Wander Fuca. For those that don't know about Wander Fuca, can you just explain how it all began and what you set out to accomplish when you started the business?
yeah, for sure. And I guess, I'm realizing in more of the meetings I show up to, our business name is Wander Fuca, as in wandering around. So it's a little play on words. Sometimes when saying it, it's hard to really distinguish that. But basically, we started as a co-working space here in Port Angeles. I had run a few different co-working spaces down in the Portland area when I was there for a number of years. My wife is actually from the area, so I'm in Port Angeles here. I'm born and raised in Eugene, Oregon, but when COVID hit, we left the Portland area. We're looking for a new home. We've been up here a number of times visiting family, and so we said, "Hey, let's head up to Port Angeles, put our back up against the mountains, and see what's going on up there." We have four kids. Our kids are fifth generation Port Angeles, so I'm the transplant. The rest of my family are the locals here, so kind of a unique blended experience. When I first moved here, it was right after COVID hit, and I do fully remote work. So I'm a marketing consultant. I work with clients all over the country and internationally, and so I don't necessarily I need an office, but I really like working with people, interacting with people on a daily basis. So I joined a co-working space that was previously in the Wharf, but that was right after COVID and kind of the worst time to try to be operating in a shared community. So they ended up closing down their doors. Since post-COVID recovery, there's been definitely a demand for remote working services. So the longer I spent here in Port Angeles, the more I realized there was demand for that. The more people I interacted with. So we ended up taking lease on the space. We're right on the corner of First and Front Street, just east of the fountain of Moss here, and kind of slow rolled co-working. Again, still trying to figure out, is there demand here? Kept our expenses low, just making sure that we're not overextending ourselves or trying to create something that's not here. And what we found, and that was back into 2022, at the end of 2022. Over the last few years, we've definitely seen that demand not necessarily grow, but more people start to identify and I guess identify their needs for a shared office workspace. You're getting people that are getting a little bit fatigued from working from home, looking for a place to be in a shared environment. So we opened up co-working services, really affordable. Desk rates. Basically, people either pay a day pass or a monthly membership, and the goal for us isn't to expand that into a business that keeps growing, but really just facilitate the need that already exists here. So right now, as it stands, we have just over 30 monthly members that are we consider full time. They're not necessarily here full time, but they are members. So we actually we developed a wait list because once you get 30 people in this space, it gets a little tight. And then throughout kind of the peak visitor season, we actually get a good number of day pass users that are traveling for work, traveling for play, but need to jump on a call, clock in for the day. Maybe they're a remote worker themselves. So that's kind of the, I guess, founding journey of Wander Fuca as a whole. But again, it's really just been adapting to kind of the existing needs here and the existing talent and remote workers, entrepreneurs, people that need this office space.
Great. I mean, it's awesome. You have a wait list. It's a great thing.
Mhm.
Who's the typical professional and or what industry that uses your co-working space?
Yeah, that's a good question. We don't really have an overwhelming single category of remote worker here. We've got a number of remote workers in tech that are developers or in the marketing side of things. We have attorneys, we have people working in environmental. Actually, we have a number of remote workers that here on contracts with different organizations in the area, and so they're kind of in this in between season of navigating full time life here while also still kind of working on a temporary basis. So we really have quite a diversity of workers down the space. And I wouldn't necessarily say all of them are remote workers in the traditional sense either. We have a number of members that have traditional jobs in our community, and they use this as kind of their entrepreneurial playground, if you will. So after hours, they come in and they have the space where they can kind of feed off of that energy. So it's really all over the place, but I think that's what makes it really unique.
We work closely with Vibe Coworks in Poulsbo,
Yeah.
and it's been really cool to be a part of that because just some of the companies have started right there in that office, and some of the innovation that's come out of there is, I mean, it's inspiring at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'd love to partner with you any way we can as far as entrepreneurial growth.
Yeah, I love Vibe Coworks is awesome. We kind of had history. Actually, when I started my co-working space in the Portland area, we were just across the water in Vancouver, Washington. I'd gone to a global co-working conference in New York City, met with a number of other people founding their co-working businesses on in the Northwest, and Vibe Coworks is one of kind of our original founder buddies. So we've stayed in touch over the years, and it's been fun to see their growth. And that's something that moving to Port Angeles, I get inspired by other examples that maybe are growing beyond just traditionally opening up office space, but starting to get involved in kind of the economic development engine a little bit more and figuring out their place in that ecosystem.
So, before we started the call, we were briefly talking about remote workers and all the factors that play into our economy. I know Colleen did some research on remote work and how it impacts the economy. The EDC actually even had a video trying to attract remote workers at one point, and then we looked into the numbers, and there's some conflicting data whether it helps the economy, whether it's how basically how it impacts. So I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, and then I wanted to pull Colleen as well and just have a little chat about it.
Yeah, can I add just a bit there? We
Please.
did in 2021, I believe it was, or 2022, we interviewed almost 1,000 people across grocery stores in our county. The survey was created from a PhD economist, tried to make it really standardized and trying not to sway the outcomes of the questions. And we chose grocery stores because we really were trying to get um, a, a good cross section of the community. And based on that, it came out that about 6% of the population were remote workers. And that again, that was a couple years ago. It could have increased since then, but that makes quite a bit of sense. That's like 5,000 people in our county that would be remote workers. And information about how they spent money and what they felt were barriers for them for the economy. So, and all that information, by the way, is on our website under 5-year plan. I think it's a 156-page document. It was really a huge undertaking. But anyway, that something that we really looked at closely was the remote worker trend of our county that was clearly increasing. We asked them how long they had been here, and the vast majority of them had been here for shorter than 2 years. So, it was definitely a COVID impact.
Yeah. Appreciate that context, Colleen. And I actually, when I first moved here, I looked into that report and into that data because I was fascinated by, that information. And I think, one thing I'd like to, I guess, address is the remote work environment has changed significantly the further away we get from COVID. So I think that's one thing that I keep trying to make sure we're paying attention to is how are the behaviors of people that are in remote work or solopreneurs, how are they changing? And I think one of the biggest things that we're seeing, first of all, is the closer to COVID you get, or I guess the further away from COVID you get, the more you get lifestyle needs that are expanding beyond simply just working. And so what we're experiencing here in Wander Fuca with our members are, a lot of people are moving here. First of all, out of about 33 members, I would say over 90% of them have moved here within the last 5 years. So that definitely echoes the reporting that you saw out of that information from 2022. One thing that maybe doesn't necessarily get collected in that data, and I'd be curious to kind of hear that feedback, is what comes with them. Most of our members have families or partners. They have children in our school system. A lot of them are actually working at some of the larger employers. And so the remote worker is actually someone that's contributing to their household income, and they're actually bringing in outside expenses that aren't extracting from current jobs that are here. That's one perspective. The other perspective too is a lot of the remote workers, especially in Wander Fuca, and I am the perfect example for this. I moved here, I was fully remote. I didn't rely on any clients here locally. I could have been a fly on the wall and simply just went and got my groceries and went home and just spent my time in the park and outside, and you wouldn't have known my existence here in the community. One thing that we're seeing, I think, in the behaviors of remote work and kind of the entrepreneur landscape, especially the further we would get away from COVID, is the desire to be involved and interact with our community is growing. So a lot of the remote workers are getting that post-COVID fatigue and wanting to get back out in the community and figure out how do I interact with this community that I call home, beyond simply just buying my groceries, beyond simply just getting my coffee. And so, looking at me as an example for that, I wanted to get involved in these economic development conversations. I wanted to get involved with the waterfront district and what they're trying to do with the businesses downtown. And I think, the thing that I always try to remind people about remote workers is they're not just, clocking in and clocking out. They're bringing experience, they're bringing perspectives, they're bringing skills that don't necessarily exist all the time in our community. And so the more we can start to ask, less, I think, to the point of how do we recruit more remote workers and more of who's already here and how can we invite them to the table? How can we create opportunities for them to show up? And again, similar to, my journey, I've connected with a lot of people who have similar journeys in Port Angeles of that they were remote, pretty removed from a lot of the happenings, but then they've had to navigate some of the hurdles, but now have started to find their way to the table to be able to join some of these conversations. My goal with Wander Fuca is, as a collective, be able to start to maybe lower those barriers or start to create opportunities for people to navigate over them. We have kind of a running joke in Wander Fuca here with our members. Everyone that moves here, lives here, I'm sure everyone on this call has heard this 1,000 times, but Port Angeles has all the right ingredients, right? Everyone always says that. What's funny is with the remote work community and the entrepreneurs, the people kind of building at more of the solopreneur level, we're always maybe only a few steps away from hitting the eject button. So the bigger those hurdles are, the harder it is for us to get footing in the community that we're trying to call home. And so internally, we have a joke that we're all kind of swatting each other's hands away from the eject button. Like, hey, you're here, I'm here. Like, let's navigate these hurdles together. So get your hand away from the eject button. You don't need to move away just to, solve your problems. We can do that together here. Unfortunately, over the last 6 years that I've been here, I've met so many talented, skilled, and like highly professional people that could be valuable asset to our community that have hit that eject button. And I think that's actually a big part of the reason why I started to get more involved and not necessarily trying to create an opportunity for myself, but start to navigate how we lower these hurdles for other people that were on that same journey that I was. Because, well, first of all, I miss some of the friends that I've, lost to moving away over the last few years, not to mention just recognizing how valuable they can be to our community if we identify ways that we can open up that conversation and invite them to the table.
That's awesome input, Kylan. And definitely something to be said there. I know Mitch is an example. When he first he moved back as a remote worker and then transitioned into a local employee. You mentioned solopreneurs, and I would put those people in a much different category than remote workers, because that overhead, that expense, they're investing here, and that we totally want. The more small businesses, the more sole proprietors we have here, absolutely helps our economy. And I think we do welcome any remote workers. But the question that we were grappling with after we made that video was recruiting remote workers. We decided that trying to actively recruit people to move here that could work virtually, that we realized that wasn't in the best interest of our economy. Because if they if they converted into a really involved citizen, that's one thing, but we were finding the majority of the people that we interviewed that were that remote worker piece, they were not engaging, they weren't going to churches, they were just much more connected with their community where their headquarters was located, and then their office was just here. Yes, they engage in recreational opportunities, but not really in the community structure. And so we, made the decision to take that video down. And I personally had to apologize to a bunch of housing advocates because they were not pleased that, by doing this, we were essentially increasing the cost of housing.
Yeah,
So,
I appreciate that perspective. I think, one thing that I want to continue to remind people is the culture of remote work has changed significantly the further we get away from COVID. And so two things, one, I think I think it would be a disservice to our potential or opportunity with our talent pool to not open up that, not necessarily aggressive recruitment, but open up that, those opportunities and turn our back to remote workers coming here. Another perspective too to take in consideration, we're seeing a lot of remote workers either be called back into work because they're now instead of being fully remote, there's a hybrid situation. So you have a lot of people that maybe were in the Seattle area that now they're having to go back to work. And so now they're facing a decision. Do I move back to the area? Do I commute 2.5 hours, 3 times a week? Or do I now kind of do what a lot of remote workers have been preparing with kind of the cruise control I've been on? Do I switch my hat from remote worker to more of an entrepreneur, or how do I start investing in kind of the home that they chose? Remote workers that buy a home here are invested here, and so I think it's a disservice to not recognize that there is a pathway for them to be more involved. Again, I understand your distinction between actively recruiting remote workers to move here. I think if the more we can clarify and identify what that pathway looks like and start to, put metrics of success to that, then there maybe we don't have to apologize so much for recruiting more remote workers, because we start to see what that pathway looks like and how it can be something that, from my perspective, I believe it can be something that can be impactful and beneficial to the rest of the contributors to our economic development ecosystem.
Great, thank you. It looks like Jim has a question. Go ahead, Jim, or a comment.
Not as much of a question, but a statement. And Colleen, I'm quite surprised at the results of that study. And maybe the premise of recruitment was what scared people or concerned people. Because if you look at what is happening in Clown County, we are an in-migration economy, period. We are not birthing people. We're very few. So we are an in-migration. And if you look at what our primary challenges are, which is age demographic, right? Lack of children, growing group of children, low income levels, and significant fundamental challenges to traditional economic development or traditional job growth, because of transportation, because of a variety of reasons, just our population. This trend is happening, and it's very positive to our community. These people are very intelligent, very bright. They are not needing a whole lot of social services for their existence. They, as Kylan has described, they are creating some ingredients in our community that wouldn't be existing if it weren't for them. And if you look at some of the art related and the entertainment related initiatives that are underway, those have been primarily developed by entrepreneurs and a younger demographic that has moved into our area. And again, I think it's happening on its own. I see it. I have clients. I probably have had over the last 2 years a dozen clients that exactly fit that model. Either both of them are working remotely for someone else, or they're running their business from their home and bringing that economic value back to the community. So, I think this is very positive for the community, and I just wonder what the pushback was in concern.
Yeah.
Maybe it was just the framing of.
So I'll tell you, now there's a big difference between I am a small business owner and I'm working from home. That is very positive. Everybody was very supportive of that. They could possibly hire employees. At the EDC, we have been laser focused on our workforce. So how do we create high wage jobs for our workforce? And through the data, this is, really next to impossible to debate. But if you look at the quarterly census of employee wages, so this is through the Employment Security Department, how much are people getting paid in different industries? Our median wage per year is about $59,000, as I recall. The last time it was produced. So this is if you go to esd.wa.gov, and if you look up quarterly census of employment wages, there's data by county and by type of business, type of industry. And so a lot of that data went into our 5-year plan. But what we find, and if you think, and you're totally right, younger people that are remote workers that have children, overall, I think that's really a positive. But the vast majority that are moving here, and you're right, we're an in-migration community, the vast majority are retirees. And so, and they make good money and they spend money, but where they spend, and again, if you're talking about the entrepreneur, it's helpful. But if you're talking about the workforce, the way retirees spend is in retail, and oftentimes that's Walmart, Costco, that kind of thing, and the profits go elsewhere. Does create some jobs, but they're not high wage jobs, generally speaking. Costco does better, but Home Depot and Safeway and Walmart, many of those, and this is just an average because there certainly are outliers. But between retail, personal services, and hospitality, the wages, and you can go to the report and see what those wages are well below our average. So what we're trying to do, so 30 years ago, we were at 85% of our state's average wage. Today, we're at 60% of our state's average wage. If we want to improve the life of people in the workforce, we need to increase their wages. And just general macro trends, the more retirees that move here, the more services that will be needed that don't pay very well. And so we at the EDC have been trying to create and support businesses in industry sectors that pay really well: forest products, maritime, manufacturing, and construction. Those four sectors, and that's all recompete work as well, are jobs where they pay above the median wage of our county. So anyway, that's a bit of, and every job is important to that family, and for some people, working in hospitality is great. It's very seasonal at time in certain sectors. And so that works out really well for them, maybe if they're in college or whatever. But for families that are looking to, get by, and keep in mind this during this period, as we've gone from 85% of the state's wage down to 60, our the cost of rent or buying a house has gone in the opposite direction in a much more extreme percentage increase than what our wages went up. So, if you look at the University of Washington's housing data, where they track information about wages versus the what it costs for a median home priced home or an entry home, we are one of the worst in the state. And it's not just us. I think Island County's the worst. They just are full of retirees and they don't have a lot of high wage jobs. So the younger people that live there, absolutely can't afford to purchase, certainly, and the rents are so high. So it's a problem economically. And, it's a bigger problem than the Clallam EDC can resolve, certainly, or our county can resolve. Our state has all sorts of policies that, with our energy code and our building code requirements, that make it incredibly expensive to build. So it's a multifaceted issue.
Colleen, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, please.
I think one thing to keep in mind, and this is, I think you and I are aligned on this. The perspective I'm trying to bring with remote workers and co-working is less, hey, EDC, turn those ads back on, start recruiting again, right? And I think it's more, to your earlier point, from the survey data you collected, you found that remote workers were not going to churches. They were not integrating in the communities. I also recognize that. And a part of what I'm trying to problem solve from Wander Fuca is, how do we get them to get involved in those communities?
Right.
I think that is a part of that integration of the people that are already here. And the more we can start to identify what we can do to create successful integration, the more we can start to assign a value that starts to answer to what the points that Jim is bringing up. And I think that's been a part of these last couple of years where we've seen this significant increase in traffic through our doors here at Wander Fuca and involvement in the community side of what we're doing at Wander Fuca. And I think those are that's the data that I think I'm excited to come and bring to present as we start to identify, who is involved in the larger ecosystem for economic development in our community. Obviously, what can we do from our perspective from Wander Fuca to get behind the work that the EDC is doing, and also provide insight to maybe a more in-depth look at a demographic that maybe has previously been under-identified, is how I would say it. And so I think that's I think the point that I'm getting across now is, I know from the 30 plus people downstairs that they don't just spend money at grocery stores, that they don't just, mimic maybe the behavior of a simply retired couple. They're buying real estate, they're buying commercial buildings, they're flipping commercial buildings into businesses on the side because they make enough money from their remote work job that they're starting to see, and a lot of these people that are, creating these opportunities, they're all kind of entrepreneurs, right? They've had experiences in different larger metro areas. They've experienced things that they appreciate in their community that they want to have. And now that they're calling Port Angeles home, they're not just saying, man, it'd be really nice if someone opened that thing here. They're going, well, I've got some resources. But how can we start to do that thing that makes it something that we can enjoy because we're calling this place home? And that's where I think the overlap between maybe this remote work and solopreneur community on one end of the ecosystem overlaps with some of recruiting for some of our larger employers, because larger employers need to attract talent to their organization, but the culture of the community for those people that are working in that organization are going to be really similar needs to the remote work community. So if anything, the insight we can get from our remote work community is going to give us the ingredients that we need to create in order to recruit some of these jobs that are being developed out of the port and some of our larger employers. So I think that's, again, it's less of let's recruit more, you guys are missing it, what's the EDC's job, and more of, hey, how do we continue to work together? How do we get a full picture of the economic development ecosystem? And how do we all start to identify our roles in that we're putting stuff on the table that we can start to share notes, look what we have, look what you have, and how can we work together to really point development in a direction that we can kind of all get behind.
Another thing that we identified was that, and this was through our work under Opportunity Zones 1.0. We worked with the different financial advisors in our county, and I found that there was like $5.5 billion worth of wealth in Clallam County. No, that was Clallam and Jefferson County. And it was really interesting that there was and what we want to do is try to transform those retirees that move here and remote workers that move here, as you're talking about, to investing their time, their talent, and their wealth into Clallam County. And what we were finding is that the donations that they were giving were back in their old community. So they were, and what was really great at transforming that was Field Hall. There were, because other entities that were looking for donations were not successful in getting them. If you talk to Christy Smith at United Way, the retirees weren't converting their hometown thinking into let's donate, let's invest into our community, which you could see in the way voting patterns happened as far as supporting school bonds. People didn't want to invest and support school bonds. Thank God that's finally changed, but that's been a real challenge for folks, trying to get them to think of this community as their hometown, not just their retirement location. And that's an important thing, to reach out to retirees that live here to get them to get involved and, change their way of thinking.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I that's to my earlier point. I think that's why we're problem solving integration, not for retirees. That's a different demographic that I don't have any involvement with, but for remote workers and the transplant entrepreneurs or solopreneurs, if you will. That is that. That's that barrier, that hurdle I was talking about is that integration, right? I'm going to send my money out to somewhere else because I don't have a relationship with my community.
Yeah.
What I'm
Right.
finding, and this is probably where I would argue without the data to back it right now, the remote work community difference between remote work community and the retiree community is the remote work community is actively trying to open that pathway of relationship, right? They are starting families. They're at the beginning of their journey with Port Angeles. And so the more we can identify those opportunities to invite them into that integration, the more we can start to change the difference in those spending and behavior patterns between the remote work community and the retiree community. And it's that relationship. It's those third places. And I think that's what we're doing here at Wander Fuca. We're attempting to do, and we're seeing that in small doses already, right? We're bringing in art. We're part of the Second Saturday Art Walk, and the relationship that gets built between a remote worker who doesn't know any of the artists locally, they now build that relationship. They know that. And even to Jim's earlier point, a lot of the remote workers have spouses or partners that are also artists that are working with the hub and working with the Fine Arts Center and starting to get involved in the community in a lot more ways than simply just their paycheck at the grocery store. And I think those are the distinctions I think that I'm trying to I guess call out because I am representing a demographic of people that are hungry to come to the table. They just don't know how to. And so the more we can start to bridge what that invitation looks like, I think the more we're going to start to be able to identify value. And I would love to see a day where we do open up recruiting again for remote workers, but instead of apologizing to the housing advocates, we can actually back it up with no. This is actually an overwhelmingly positive uh, you know, uh, introduction into our community, and these are people that are contributing more than maybe just your typical retiree that moved here and is just hitting the repeat button with what they did in another community.
Yeah, that's great.
So, great discussions. I have plenty of points to hit. Wanted to dive into, we've already touched on this. At the EDC, quite often there's a phrase that's echoed that our greatest export is our youth. And obviously, some of what you just talked about is combating that. I wanted to hear from both of you. What are some strategies that we can do to keep that our homegrown youth talent in place here in Clallam County, in Port Angeles, Squim Forks?
Yeah, I love this conversation. I have 4 kids myself. My oldest is 13, so this question is something that my wife and I think about often. What does Port Angeles have for our kids in this next 10 years that is going to be helpful for them growing into the adults that they want to pursue and be? And are there enough opportunities for them to do that here? To be honest with you, that is a question that we've struggled with quite often and significantly over the last 6 years. I think there are a lot of opportunities. Again, all of my questions are going to come back to co-working and remote work, but I think there's a lot of opportunities with internships, with exposure and just in perspectives to different career opportunities. Someone that's going through high school that knows they can become a program developer for a tech company and make a decent wage and kind of live wherever they want. They don't know that until they see that. And so most of the time in a small community like this, they have to move to a larger metro area to start to get those perspectives. But by creating those third spaces and developing those relationships and that integration plan, I think there's ways to start to give our youth opportunities to see those career pathways. And that's something that we're working on. We have a few interns this summer, not through a formal intern program, but kind of as a testing ground for how does this work? How can we bring interns into a co-working space and allow them to almost walk around like a smorgasbord and say, wow, this is a lot of cool different things. And I didn't know you can do all that from here in Port Angeles. And this is something we did in Vancouver, Portland area with our co-working spaces down there. We actually had a partnership and program developed with WSU Vancouver for interns, and they were assigned to the co-working space as a whole. But then our members got to sign up for them to come spend time with them individually. So interns were able to come around and actually kind of choose this like little micro pathway for them. So it wasn't just simply all summer at architecture firm. It was a summer at our co-working space that had a lot of different experiences for them. And I don't know if you guys remember being in high school or kind of trying to figure out your career, but sometimes you quickly figure out the thing you thought you wanted to do wasn't what you want to do. And so being stuck in an internship for a longer period of time, you only have so many summers before you got to actually go work. So.
I know Colleen needs to jump off here in a bit. Do you have any closing thoughts on that, Colleen?
No, it's great.
Awesome.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thanks, Colleen. I still have a few questions for you, Kylan, so don't go anywhere. And
Yeah, not going anywhere. And actually, I was given space for Colleen to jump in if she needed to, but I do have some more thoughts on kind of the youth conversation. I think one other angle that I think about is the entrepreneur. And again, I blend these worlds a little bit more than maybe people outside of the co-working space or industry blend them. Remote workers are entrepreneurs, right? They've developed a lifestyle that they've wanted to create. They're problem solvers in that sense. So when you give entrepreneurs enough money and enough problems in front of them, they start to want to figure out how to solve those. And so I think that's another perspective to our youth growing up, is being able to see that problem solving sometimes creates careers or creates opportunities that wouldn't otherwise exist. And that's something that we model in our family with our kids directly. Is just because there's not a job for it doesn't mean that that's not something that you can pursue. And so I think, even back to Colleen's earlier point, being able to tie in some of our investment money into the startup environment here in Port Angeles can be something that's impactful, because there are a lot of young people in our high schools, in the college, that would be really well seated into some of those environments, maybe not necessarily as successful founders right off the bat, but being able to be a part of that environment, I think, is something that can suit them well. And I think that's what I get excited about. Obviously, there's already efforts to start to develop those programs, but the more we can kind of come together and recognize those opportunities, again, that's just our little corner and piece of that ecosystem. Not that there's not other ways as well.
If we were to have this conversation in 5 years, what do you hope would have changed about Port Angeles?
That's a good question. 5 years is a long time.
Right.
For others, it's not. For me, that's a long time, living day to day. I think one of the biggest things that I hope to see in the next 5 years is, continued movement towards aligning our efforts. And I think this goes across many different sectors of our community, right? Economic development is the conversation we're having right now. So more of these types of conversations, that's less of, are you doing this? You should be doing this, and more of, hey, we've got this perspective that maybe provides a little more insight. Is there a way for us to work towards sharing elements of that perspective? And is there anything that we can do to help provide value to what you're building, right? What can Wander Fuca do to provide value to the EDC? And not that that's the only example, but I think those are the things that, I get excited about, kind of bringing stability back to a fragmented community. And, COVID obviously didn't help with a lot of that, but I think a lot of people are hungry for that, both on the micro level within co-working, but also in our community as a whole, is being able to look across the table and say, hey, what are you doing? And is that something that we can help with and that will be mutually beneficial, right? Let's work together on building. So I think ultimately, that's the high level view of the five-year plan, if you will, is to see more harmony in the movement of the ecosystem.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. We got about 15 minutes left, and there's some questions in the chat. But before we dive into that, just wanted to hear how Visit Port Angeles is going. I had a friend from Spokane send me a reel. He's like, wow, this looks awesome. Like, can we go do this? So it's obviously working. You're reaching another corner of the state. Just wanted to hear insights that you've learned along the way.
Yeah. So just to clarify, Wander Fuca has the contract with the city for the Visit Port Angeles destination marketing for 2026. So that is the hat that we take off when we put on the Visit Port Angeles hat. It's going great. We are having such a great time kind of rebuilding the foundation of what this looks like moving forward. Obviously, marketing and the digital side of things has changed a lot over the last few years, and is every year seems to increase in speed. That's an area that I get really excited to be in, because we're not only helping to improve and bring that work local and start to increase the volume output, but starting to define kind of that long-term plan. And that's one of our deliverables actually is developing a 5-year plan for Visit Port Angeles, even if we're not involved in it in 5 years. So I think it's really special to be in that place, work with our team, and work directly with the city as well to kind of pair that. And one, I guess, other perspective on Visit Port Angeles as a whole is again, back to this point I keep saying, there's a real overlap between visitors and remote workers, and visitors and people that eventually identify this place as a place they want to move, whether we want them to or not. So I think that's why this integration conversation is so important to me. So, but yeah, as a whole, Visit Port Angeles is going really well. One thing, and I would encourage, and this is platform, so I'll use it. We want to hear from your business. If you're a visitor-facing business, please reach out to us, hello@visitportangeles.com. We want to support the businesses in our community that are visitor-facing, and we want to not only support them in sharing on social media, but also interacting with how we can help support the areas that you need help with. And that's not services as much as we have developing newsletter for our visitor service stakeholders that goes out just with tips and tricks and all the things that make it things that you can do as a business that make it easy for Visit Port Angeles to turn around and share your stuff. So it's been going well. And I guess I'll add one more note too. We've been really working hard with our AI kind of search integration. So AIO. And optimization. I think that's something that this last couple of weeks we've been really starting to see the impact of Visit Port Angeles popping up and language models, and we're excited to see that progress, because a lot more people are turning to ChatGPT over Google these days. So being able to make sure that we're showing up in those results has been an important part of kind of our development plan. So.
Yeah, the AIO is super interesting. I've been trying to learn more and more about it. It's complex, but I think it's the direction we're going, and got to keep those AI chatbots happy and feeding them what we want. So,
yep, for sure. Yep. Whether you like it or not, right?
It's true. It's just the fact where we're at. Well, cool. I'm going to run through some of these questions, or it looked like more comments. John Temple put in the chat, he said, I was in the call center industry for 30 years, helping companies manage call centers around the world. The industry developed technology and went to remote workers first to manage peak traffic. Have you thought about, once you have the technology and seats, about creating a call center here?
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I actually worked in a call center for a bit, part of my earlier years, so I have experience being tethered to a phone. Used to work for Bowflex for a short season, and then finally got my transfer over to the social media department, so that was fun. Yeah, call centers are tricky. A lot of call centers are moving their services overseas, and so call center infrastructure is not necessarily something that I personally would pursue to develop here in Port Angeles, but I'm sure there's opportunity there. One of the challenges in running a shared co-working space is navigating the differences that each member needs for their work environment. So the balance of phone rooms and meeting rooms, and whether or not it's a quiet space or not, those are all kind of the nuances that we have to navigate slowly. So inviting a bunch of people talking on the phone all the time gives me a little bit of anxiety, but I'm sure there's an opportunity for someone for that out there.
Beth from the Swim Chamber put, Greater Spokane Inc. found, after a study, what would happen if 5% of their population chose to move to Idaho or Montana. There was a steep cliff for charitable donations after about 5 years. Relocation didn't hit the nonprofits immediately, but a 5% change in the population over donors was catastrophic over the 5 years, which makes sense. I mean, the trickle down of that. I think that weird. Yeah. Thank you, Beth. Steven put a comment in the chat, but he also has his hand raised. So I'm going to go ahead and call on him and have him address that or ask another question.
Sure. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. No, I just thought I'd throw some color into here a little bit on based on what Jim's comment and the conversation here. I like to remind people that, Clallam County has 78,000 to 80,000 population. It's growing a little less than 1%. So call it like 700 new people join our community each year. What people don't realize is because of the demographics, we have more people over 70 than we have under 18. In fact, we have twice the national average in retired people, about 30% versus kind of 15%. So what that also means is that we actually lose about 1,000 people to deaths every year. So if we lose 1,000 people, yet our population grows by 700-ish, that means we have 1,700 new people come to the community each year. 500 of those are births. 1,200 of those are actually the in-migration that Jim was talking about. So there definitely is a turning over. And you can just imagine after 5 years, the one thing I can guarantee you, the future is going to look vastly different than the past. The comment that I made was really relative to, who is Clallam County or Port Angeles competition? Our rural communities, we're not just competing with some kind of neighboring town anymore. I think a lot of people have kind of an insular nostalgia perspective. They're not realizing that we're competing in a global macro economy now. We're competing against Amazon and e-commerce. And so our rural community is not going to win by trying to recreate an economy from the 1970s or 80s. It's just not going to happen. The one advantage is that we do have, and that cannot be replicated elsewhere, are some of our natural amenities, our deep water
Mhm.
port, the Olympic National Park, the outdoor recreation opportunities. So those are the things that I think we can sell people on here, and rather than having kind of a negative view on kind of the global economic impacts or even the threat of e-commerce, I think we can pivot and we can adapt and we can leverage companies like Amazon to allow local businesses to maybe sell more nationally and things like that. So I guess I just wanted people to think a little bit more broadly. I, in fact, had one individual tell me, all we need is another paper mill. I'm sorry, we're not going backward, guys. And so I just want people to open up a little bit more and realize that it's we need to adapt and pivot to create a more vibrant future for our community as well. That's it.
Great comment.
Yeah.
One of my questions actually was, what advantage does Port Angeles have compared to big cities? So you kind of hit on that. So thank you. Anything to add, Kylan?
Yeah, no, I appreciate Stephen. I think with co-working and the remote worker environment, I think that's where again just that like really identifying where we're missing the mark with integration and inviting what seems to be 1,200 plus people migrating to our community. I imagine a significant portion of those are retirees, but that still leaves hundreds of people every year that are moving here that are looking for a place to land and call home. And so I think just really nailing down specifically from our perspective with the remote work entrepreneur, solopreneur environment, how can we help integrate them into the community to start to join some of these conversations? Because we're bringing these conversations now, but even to the 5 year conversation, who's going to be holding these conversations in 5 years from now? Hope to be around to have some of those conversations at that point, but there may be within the last 5 years, there's been a lot of new voices that have been join the conversation and have been making meaningful impact kind of on some of the progress that we're seeing in areas where we're seeing progress. So the more we can start to increase that invite and increase that value for people to join join the table, I think is an area that I'm trying to push into.
No, thanks, Kylan. I really appreciate all your efforts. Look, I'm biased. Clearly, I'm one of those remote workers that's investing in my community, volunteering a ton as well. So I really do want a vibrant future for us as well.
Yeah, appreciate it.
I think Tim Dalton has his hand raised. Tim works at the county. He's the housing and is it grant resource director? Is that correct, Tim? Awesome. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, we can't hear you. No luck yet. It doesn't look like you're on mute. Now you're on mute. Let's see. Huh.
Is it still me? This is Steven. I'm trying to
No,
mute.
No,
I'm not sure why it's working. Maybe put it in the chat. Oh man, he's always got good insights. All right. Any other questions from the audience while Tim gets his mic figured out? Carol said, thanks for a great call. Honestly, I really like this format. We've never done it this way before, but it seems we've gotten more engagement than we typically do. So that's a great thing. Dale's got his hand up. Go ahead,
Good
Dale.
morning. Thank you for the conversation. Um, for many years, I've been watching what happened in Astoria, Oregon, where it became a refuge for young people who couldn't afford Portland. And I've been had this idea that Port Angeles could become the Astoria of Washington, and I'm just wondering if that's a pipe dream.
I appreciate that that alignment. I think I've thought of that connection. You know, Astoria to Portland. Is that what Port Angeles is to Seattle per se? I spent a lot of time in Astoria. Obviously, being in Portland, I've always appreciated my time out there. Uh, again, bias here. There's a really nice co-working space right on the harbor in Astoria that I've definitely spent a lot of hours in. So I think, even greater than the story analogy, I like the point that you're bringing up, a refuge for young people. I think that's what I'm seeing in the community here in Wander Fuca, and the people that are coming here. It's younger people that are wanting to start a family, that are wanting to kind of move on from maybe the lifestyle that they are not lifestyle, just pace of life that maybe Seattle was offering them, and so they're moving here. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about moving this conversation beyond remote workers are the same as retirees, because there really is a longing for investing in the community, because they're calling it home, they're investing in the real estate here, and they're saying, I want to raise my family here. So I do like that point, Dale, about the refuge for young people. If we can start to identify where that low hanging fruit is to start to be that, I think that can be an interesting angle, as long as we can facilitate the services and or opportunities needed for that.
I wonder what Mitch thinks about that.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, I like to call myself as local as I get. I've been in Sequim pretty much my whole life, besides going to college in Spokane. Um, yeah, I think it's possible. I wouldn't say it's a pipe dream, but the dynamics need to shift, and we need to have the jobs to support it at the end of the day. Good paying jobs that someone will stick around for at the end of the day. But yeah, great question. Thank you.
Well, and I will. I mean, I'll jump on the back of that. One thing I get excited about with bamboo hotel conversation that we were talking about earlier is, Astoria has Portland investing in it, right? I'm sure that comes with a whole suite of issues they're navigating locally. I don't live in Astoria, just visited there many times. So I think just identifying, like, hey, how do we get people to see an opportunity to invest here, to create those jobs, to create infrastructure that can help us grow and sustain ourselves beyond simply just or worse, right? So I think increasing the opportunities for people to invest in our community is important, and so I get excited about the announcement of people choosing Port Angeles to invest, to spend their time, to grow their businesses. And the co-working side and the remote worker side is just a very micro version of these larger investments. These are people making the smaller decisions that I'm going to choose to work here. I'm going to choose to buy a house here. And I think if we can appreciate and start to connect those dots all the way through, I think that's a way that we can start to see that value increase.
Absolutely. Well, we're at the 9 o'clock hour. I just want to say thank you, Kylan. Thank you, Wander Fuca. This has been great, and I think the community as a whole is thankful that you decided to come here. And I wouldn't call yourself the transplant. You got ties here. You've been here long enough. Any closing thoughts before we close this out?
No, I appreciate the conversation. I like this format. I told Mitch beforehand, I don't know that I can present for 40 minutes, but if we can have conversation, then I'm sure I can talk for 3 hours. So if we won't go 3 hours, but yeah, I appreciate it. What we're doing here at Wander Fuca is just, our corner of the ecosystem, and just trying to contribute to that. So appreciate the support from the community here. And yeah, look forward to seeing you all around at various places in our our community. This is the smallest place I've ever lived in, so it's always fun to see, fun, and there are times where it's less fun, but it's fun to see people around as often as I do. So,
well, thanks, Kylan. This will be up on our website later today, and let's keep the conversation moving. Thank you so
all right.
much.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Kylan. Take care, guys. Have a good day.
Bye.